to go first? All right, Martin, we're a quick shift. Martin Smith, it is Smith.
Yes.
Yes. Memory, he's going to talk about robots. Robot. He was supposed to bring a robot.
How do you know he did it?
How do I know he didn't send a robot in his place?
A very difficult question. I thought I might depart from my beautifully prepared script for a second because Bill mentioned humans. That was a TV program that was brought in fairly recently, and the advertising agency who wanted to promote it asked me to write an essay on the future of robots over the next 50 years, and paid me quite a lot of money to do that, and I did it, and I was very pleased, and they paid me. What they didn't tell me was they were going to put it in every newspaper in the UK, Times, Telegraph, Guardian, the lot. What they also didn't tell me was they did a survey asking 2,000 people, I think, what they thought of various questions about robots. Buried in those 100 questions was one question which was, would you have sex with a robot? Surprise, surprise, all the newspapers put that as their headline, even though it was one question out of 100. And 17% of Brits admitted that they would have sex with a robot. Far more, I noticed, than the audience. So somebody here is probably not being quite so frank as they were in an anonymous survey. The end result was I was inundated with journalists from America who were, who were totally convinced that Brits were completely mad because 17% of Brits would have sex with a robot, which proved their greatest suspicions. So if you're accosted by an American journalist saying you're slightly mad, it's probably my fault.
Hang on, is a vibrator a robot?
Yes.
You've got a very good vibrator there. No, because it doesn't have any intelligence.
Okay.
So for me, to be a robot, it needs to have some inputs, some outputs, and some intelligence in between. So for example, humans have 5 inputs: sound, sight, touch, taste, smell. Robots can have very, very many more. Robots can have sensors that don't exist in nature: laser, radar, GPS, well over 20 or 30 sensors a robot can have that humans can't have. The other advantage robots have is, of course, any signal inside a robot travels at about half the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. The speed of nerves down your nerve cells is about 100 meters a second. Or if so, for the robot has something like a 3 million times speed advantage over humans. The other advantage that robots have, of course, is they can have pneumatics, hydraulics, solenoids, electric motors, and we poor humans have stuck with one actuator alone, which is the muscles. Many of them, but it's only one type.
That doesn't mean we can't augment them, though.
That is true, yes. You can make yourself partly robotic, should you wish to do so. And in fact, many people are. Something like 1 in 17 UK people over 75 already have artificial hearts or artificial pacemakers or the artificial hormones. It's a very, very large number. So we are getting closer to robots as robots get closer to us. Another point I was thinking of making with the Bill's bit of video, the robot or synth brought up the philosophical concept of free will, which I think is very interesting because I think we have to believe in free will because, of course, we have no choice. So we have to be very careful as academics. We tend to be put into a position of not knowing what we're going to say next with journalists. Many of these journalists have got me to quote things, and I've said things, and the journalist has reported them. They change the words very slightly, even inverting what I actually meant. It usually makes what I said much more interesting, but it's not what I said. And that's quite common with academics and journalists. Academics have to be extremely careful not to be misled. Oh dear, member of the National... so Bill is big... I might say I'm outnumbered, so I'll stop there. What we're going to see is clearly a very, very rapid evolution. It's taken 4 billion years for us to get from bacteria to where we are now. That's from a single cell. There are around about 200 different types of cell in a human being, and each of those cells has roughly 1,000 times much DNA in it as a bacterium. So in round numbers as a starting point, we're about 250,000 times as complex as a bacterium. But we work on the same letters, the same sentences, the same language as bacterium. We like to think of ourselves as very, very special, but we share 15% of our DNA with bacteria, 75% with mice, and about 90%, 98% with chimpanzees. We love to think of us being super different, but we're not. We are not the center of the universe. The heart is just a pump, and we are just very clever bacteria. In fact, we're robots in a way, because if you take your history back generation after generation, great-grandparents, grandchildren, going back hundreds of generations to the beginning of the tree, the evolutionary tree, what you find is a bacterium which has no brains, very few sensors, very few outputs. You could describe them as mindless robots, and we're descended from them. I think maybe having offended a couple of journalists, and I would just say I'm a little more of a biological supremacist, much more so than I might have said, implied, in that, yes, robots will be able to far outstrip us, probably in intelligence, in its ability, and so forth. But it won't have gone through those billions of years of evolution, fighting for food, fighting for territory, fighting for sex. All that kind of stuff is part of our evolution. Robots won't have that, so they'll always be different.
Actually, I do have a question for you, which is not the one I told you about. But you said in a piece that I saw in the Telegraph, something about we shouldn't slow down innovation, and you made the comparison to having men with flags walking in front of cars. Now, I want to know why we shouldn't slow down innovation. I mean, it's arguable, for example, the car being a good example. If we had thought longer about the car, we might have decided it was going to burn up the planet and was a bad idea. So why shouldn't we slow down innovation? Why shouldn't we be thinking?
Well, who decides what to slow down and by how much? Sorry. The trouble is you have a sort of world government type thing, and of course we know politicians have our interests at heart and that they are faultless in their decision making. So I think I would not quite totally trust a politician to decide what would do it. The free market has its problems, but you have the ability now, if you wanted to say tomorrow, we are not going to have diesel cars in London, or we're not going to just have electric cars or something, you can, once you've found the problems, take moderate steps to ameliorate the difficulties.